In today's video, a man reached the top of the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest, but he couldn't make back it down. This is a true story from a deadly season on Mount Everest. His name was Rav Kumar, 27 years old, born in India. He had a dream to reach the top of Mount Everest, and in 2017 he made it. What started as a historic achievement quickly turned into an irreversible mistake. Because on Everest, success and tragedy are often separated by minutes. Ravi wasn't an experienced climber, but he carried a clear goal to the summit. Like men that year, he was part of a highly crowded commercial expedition. Hundreds were attempting the climb simultaneously, creating dangerous traffic jam on the mountain. And on Everest, every minute stopped means less oxygen and greater risk of death. Even so, Rav kept moving slowly toward the highest point on Earth. The climb was already taking far longer than planned, and the weather was beginning to turn. But at that point, turning back meant abandoning everything he had invested. And so, he made the same decision many others do, to keep going despite the warning signs. The air was already thinner, and each step demanded extreme effort in that hostile environment. The line ahead barely moved, turning the climb into a dangerous waiting game. And while waiting, Rav's body began losing heat rapidly. His fingers no longer responded with precision, a silent sign of increasing danger. Even so, the line finally moved, and the summit seemed closer than ever. But at altitude, the human body is already at its absolute survival limit, and delay and mistake can become impossible to correct at that point. Rav kept going step by step, slower and slower, increasingly exhausted. Supplemental oxygen was running low, and there was no guarantee of quick replacement. But at that moment, the summit was finally within sight. And then they finally arrived. After hours of waiting, Ravi finally reached the summit of Everest. But unlike expected, there was no celebration, only extreme exhaustion. Because on Everest, reaching the top is only half the journey. The descent is where most fatal accidents actually happen, and Ravi was already far beyond the safe time to begin descending. His body was at its limit, but the descent would demand even more energy. And that's when the first real sign of collapse began to appear. His breathing became irregular, and his pace dropped drastically within minutes. The exhaustion was now absolute, and every moment demanded more than he had left. Other climbers began passing him, realizing something was wrong. But stopping completely there meant being exposed to extreme cold indefinitely. He tried to continue, but his steps became uncoordinated and unstable. The lack of oxygen was now affecting not just his body, but also his mind. Simple decisions became difficult, and his reaction time slowed dangerously. Even so, he kept descending, unaware of how serious the situation had become. The traffic still caused delays, preventing a fast and safe descent, and time kept passing, consuming the little oxygen he had left. Rav began stopping more frequently, unable to maintain a steady pace. His movements slowed further, and his posture began showing extreme weakness. The descent that should be controlled was now becoming increasingly chaotic, and in that environment, chaos quickly turned into real danger. Rav tried adjusting his gear, but his hands were no longer responding properly. Small mistakes began happening, and each one increased the risk significantly. He could no longer maintain full focus, and his attention fluctuated constantly. And with every passing minute, his ability to react diminished further. Other climbers began noticing he was falling behind quickly. And on Everest, falling behind can mean being left alone in a deadly environment. Even so, Rav kept trying to descend, no longer in full control of his body. The descent was now a constant struggle between continuing to move or simply stopping. His vision began failing, and the road around him felt increasingly distant. He no longer responded quickly, and his actions became slow and imprecise. And at that point, the environment stopped being difficult and became unforgiving. Because in situations like this, even small decisions can determine life or death. And this wasn't unique to that moment, it had happened before. Her name was Maria Stridham, an Australian 34 years old, and in May of 2016, she reached the summit of Everest. And just like Rev, the real danger began on the way down. At that altitude, even small changes in the body can become life-threatening very quickly. She started feeling weak, and her condition began to deteriorate during the descent. Every step became harder, and the energy she needed was no longer there. The longer she remained at extreme altitude, the worse her condition became. And on Everest, once your body starts to fail, recovery becomes almost impossible. She tried to keep moving, but her body was no longer responding the same way. Shortly after, she could no longer continue descending on her own. And they made the same mistake. Both of them stopped to rest. Maria Stridham died after reaching the summit of Mount Everest. And Rav was now facing that exact same scenario. Rav's condition was now critical, and every step required nearly impossible effort. He could no longer maintain steady balance, and his movements grew slower and slower. His coordination was compromised, making every step a real risk. And the oxygen was now nearly gone. Without enough oxygen, the body rapidly collapses at extreme altitudes. Rev tried to continue, but his body no longer responded like before. He began stopping more often, unable to sustain any pace. And at one point, he simply stopped, unable to continue descending. Other climbers passed him, realizing the situation was worsening rapidly. But there, helping someone else meant putting your own life at risk. Rev tried to move again, but his legs no longer had enough strength. His mind was also failing, making it impossible to make correct decisions. The extreme cold kept draining energy, accelerating the collapse even further. And at that point, there was no margin left for recovery. He tried once more to gather strength and continue descending. But his body simply did not respond, and he stopped again. Now, he could no longer continue alone at extreme altitude, and time kept passing, offering no chance of recovery. At that moment, the mountain had already determined the outcome. Rav Kumar died during the descent after reaching the top of Mount Everest. He became one of the victims that season, marked by kills and fatal decisions. In 2017, at least 6 people died on Mount Everest. Overcrowding combined with delays turned the mountain into an even greater risk. Because on Everest, time is limited, and so is the human body. And decisions made under pressure can quickly become irreversible. Rav reached the top of the road, but he couldn't return. He is still frozen on Mount Everest. There are more than 300 bodies frozen there. If you want more real stories like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to stay updated. See you in the next video.